Everyone treats summer like it owes you happiness. Long days, pool parties, your best life on a loop. So what does it mean when you feel worse? The summer blues are real. It's why summer is one of the busiest stretches of the year for people starting therapy. Therapy is not only for when you're in crisis. Growth therapy is for all the moments when you decide you want more. More support, more clarity, more tools. Mental health isn't a destination you reach. It's something you build, and Grow makes that easier. Grow connects you with thousands of high-quality licensed therapists across the U.S., offering both virtual and in-person sessions, nights and weekends. You can search by what matters, like insurance, specialty, identity, or availability, and get started in as little as 2 days. There are no subscriptions, no long-term commitments. You just pay per session. Grow helps you find therapy on your time. The therapist you want takes your insurance on Grow. Grow accepts over 125 insurance plans. Sessions average $21 with insurance, and some pay as little as $0 depending on their plan. Visit growtherapy.com/book now today to get started. That's growtherapy.com/book now. growtherapy.com/book now. Availability and coverage vary by state and insurance plan.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Did you know one of the rarest sea turtles in the world is named after a Key West furniture dealer? And you can actually stay in his former home today?
Welcome to Fun in Key West, where every day feels like a mini fest. Grab a drink, take it slow. We'll show you where the locals go. Food, fun, and stories to tell. Hidden gems you know so well. Your Key West experts here to say it's fun in Key West every day.
Hey there, Island Dreamers. I'm Michelle O'Connor, and this is the Fun in Key West podcast, where we uncover the stories, people, places, food, drinks, and wonderfully quirky things that make Key West and all of the Florida Keys one of a kind. Whether you're planning a trip or just need a little island escape, grab a cold drink and settle into your island state of mind. Let's have some fun in Key West. You know how you can walk around Key West and pass a beautiful old house and think, that's pretty. Maybe you take a picture. Maybe you wonder what it costs to stay there. Or maybe you dream even bigger and wonder how much it costs to buy it. But then you keep walking. Well, today I want to tell you why you might want to stop the next time you get to the corner of Caroline and Simonton Streets, because sitting there at 601 Caroline Street is Ridley House. And this isn't just another pretty Key West house. This house gives us a fire, a ship carpenter, the beginnings of the sponge industry, a mystery turtle, a naturalist who apparently couldn't stop discovering things, and possibly a ghost and some buried treasure. I mean, really, how very Key West. So grab your coffee, cocktail, or whatever puts you in an island state of mind, because today we're talking about Richard Moore Kemp and the house that still carries part of his story. Before we wander over to Caroline Street, though, a quick thank you to today's sponsor, Key West Food Tours. With Key West Food Tours, you're not just tasting your way around the island. You're learning about the neighborhoods, the people, the history, and all those little Key West stories you might otherwise walk right past. Basically, history is even better when snacks and cocktails are involved. You can learn more and book your tour over at FunInKeyWest.com/food tour. Okay, let's go take a look at this house. First, have you seen this house? If you've wandered around Old Town, there's a pretty good chance you've walked right past it. Today it's called Ridley House, part of the Key West Historic Inns collection. It sits on Caroline Street, just a couple blocks from Duval and not far from the historic seaport. Beautiful porches, white picket fence, tropical landscaping. Very much one of those places where you walk past and go, yep, I could sit on that porch for a while. But here's the first, hey, did you know? The story of this property goes all the way back to 1845. The Samuel Kemp family purchased about a quarter of the city block and built their family home there. And the Kemps were part of the early wave of Bahamian settlers who helped shape what we now think of as Old Key West. The family would remain connected to this piece of property for 72 years. 72 years. Think about what Key West would have looked like during all those decades. There would be no cruise ships, no electric cars buzzing down Duval, no sloppy Joe's frozen drinks, and no rooster trying to steal your breakfast sandwich outside Cuban Coffee Queen. This, at that time, was a working island. Boats coming and going. You had wreckers and fishermen, merchants, cigar makers, and sponge fishermen. And right in the middle of all of that was the Kemp family. So now we know the family had deep roots on this little piece of Key West. But here's where the story gets even better. Because one of the people growing up in the middle of all of this was Richard Moore Kemp. And Richard was, well, busy. And this is where I think our story gets really good. Richard Kemp wasn't simply the guy who lived in the pretty house. He was a merchant. He sold furniture. He fished. He became involved in the sponge business. And apparently, in his spare time, he was also an amateur naturalist, which makes me wonder what this man's planner and calendar look like. Okay, at 9, we do the furniture business. Then at noon, we go fishing. And then after lunch, we discover a new species. Because Richard had a habit of paying attention to the natural world around him, and one of the things he paid attention to would eventually put his name in biology books around the world. But we're going to come back to that in a little bit. First, we need to talk about sponges. And you might be thinking discovering a rare sea turtle would be enough of a legacy for one person. Apparently, Richard Kemp did not. Because before we get to the turtle, we need to talk about another thing floating around in the waters off of Key West. Sponges. Yep, sponges. Stay with me here because you're thinking, wait, sponges? Here's another one of those interesting, hey, did you know? Before Florida became famous for natural sponges, most of the sponges being sold in the United States were imported. Then people in the Keys realized, hey, we have sponges. We have lots of them. Historical accounts credit Kemp with helping introduce Key West sponges to the New York market. And apparently, that first attempt wasn't exactly an immediate success. The early shipment almost didn't sell. But eventually, buyers realized these Florida sponges had commercial value. And suddenly, like that, Key West had another industry. By the late 1800s, sponging was big business, really big business. Hundreds of vessels worked the sponge beds around the Keys, and more than 1,000 people were employed in the industry. So the next time you're wandering around the historic seaport and looking out over all those boats, I want you to picture something a little different. Little working boats coming back loaded with lots of natural sponges. Men standing on the boats using long poles with hooks. Sponges being sorted and sold, and merchants packing them up for markets far away from Key West. Another entire economy was growing out of the water surrounding Key West. And Richard Kemp was right there during its beginnings. Believe it or not, those sponges aren't the thing he's most famous for. So now we've got Richard Kemp helping turn something growing underwater into an actual business. But while he's making money from what was in the water, he was also paying attention to what was swimming through it. And that's where our turtle finally enters our story. Enter the turtle. This is my favorite part because somewhere around 1880, Kemp encountered a small sea turtle that didn't quite look like the others. And he became convinced that this wasn't just another turtle. There was something different about it. Now imagine trying to make that argument in the late 1800s. Richard saying, I think this is a different species. And everybody else says, Richard, it's a turtle. Richard says, no, it's a different turtle. And apparently, Richard kept at it. He collected specimens, he studied them, and eventually the turtle was scientifically recognized. Today we know it as the Kemp's Ridley sea turtle. Yep, Kemp's, as in Richard Kemp. The National Park Service describes the Kemp's Ridley as the rarest sea turtle species and notes that it was named for Richard Kemp, who helped discover and study it. And here's the part I love. This isn't what he did for a living. This was not his profession. Richard Kemp wasn't sitting in some university lab. He was living in Key West, fishing, running businesses, and observing the world around him. And then suddenly he noticed something other people hadn't noticed. And I think that feels really Key West to me, because so many of the island's best stories come from people who were just simply paying attention. So by now, Richard Kemp has helped develop a sponge business and has a mystery turtle on his hands. Pretty good story already, right? But Key West apparently decided this tale needed a little more drama. And in 1886, the city caught fire. So on April 7th, 1886, Key West experienced the Great Fire of 1886, and it tore through the city. It destroyed a huge portion of Key West, including the original Kemp family home. Imagine having your family on that property since 1845, and suddenly the house is poof, gone. But the Kemps didn't leave. Richard rebuilt. And in 1888, the house we associate with him today was constructed. And here's another fantastic detail, and one of my other, hey, did you know? The man who built the house was a ship carpenter, and his name was John Sawyer, which makes complete sense when you look at old Key West architecture. This is where the expertise was. This was an island filled with people who understood ships, they understood wood, they understood wind, and they understood when Mother Nature says, hey, I'm just going to rearrange your furniture. So Sawyer brought those skills to building homes. The Richard Kemp House became a wonderful example of what is called today Key West Bahamian architecture. And if you look at the historic marker on the picket fence outside of the home, it says it's one of the best examples in the historic district. And it's still standing, more than 135 years later. Not bad work, Mr. Sawyer. And this is if we were doing a respectable, normal, everyday history podcast, we would wrap things up. We would say, beautiful historic home, interesting Key West businessman, rare turtle, the end. But this is Key West. Of course, there's a ghost story, because you knew I couldn't have an old Key West house without a ghost story. Now, I want you to put a giant Key West asterisk beside this one. This is local legend. Not the part we're going to carve out into a history textbook and say, yep, this is documented. Purely local legend. But it's much too fun not to tell you about. The story involves a caretaker often called Mr. Mosby. According to the versions of the legend, he was fiercely protective of the property and of a woman in the Kemp family who lived there. And supposedly, he had money, quite a bit of it. The legend says he didn't necessarily trust banks or didn't trust some of the characters wandering around the waterfront at Key West at that time. And honestly, fair point. So supposedly, he hid his money somewhere on the property. Gold, coins, cash. It all depends on who's telling the story what was buried. And then he died without revealing where he buried the treasure, which means, naturally, some people believe it's still there. And apparently, Mr. Mosby may still be there too, because stories have circulated about a figure seen around the property, almost as if the old caretaker said, hey, I'm not ready to clock out. I'm going to continue to keep watch. Is there buried treasure underneath Ridley House? I have absolutely no idea. But if somebody is renovating and a flower bed and finds a coffee can full of 19th century gold coins someday, I just want to make a note that we talked about it here first. And while we're talking about discovering stories hiding around Key West, let's look. This gives me another great reason to tell you why I love today's sponsor, Key West Food Tours. Their tours let you explore the island through food while also learning about the people, the neighborhoods, and the history along the way. So if you're the kind of person who hears a story like this and immediately wants to know what else have I been walking past, this is a really fun way to explore. And bonus, there's food and cocktails. Learn more at FunInKeyWest.com food tour. Okay, back to our turtle house. Now, whether Mr. Mosby is still wandering around the property, I'll let you decide. That's almost not the point, because look at how much story we have just uncovered behind one beautiful house, and that's the part I really love. Because if I had simply said, Richard Kemp House, circa 1888, you probably would have said, hey, that's nice, and kept walking. But now, look at everything sitting behind that picket fence. A Bahamian family helping establish early Key West, the Great Fire of 1886, a house rebuilt instead of abandoned, a ship carpenter building homes on an island, the beginnings of a major Florida sponge industry, a businessman who wandered around studying nature, one very unusual turtle, and maybe, just maybe, a caretaker who refuses to clock out. That's Key West. The buildings are beautiful, but the really interesting stuff is the people who lived inside of them. Which brings us back to the house you can actually walk past today. Because Richard Kemp's home didn't disappear into Key West history. It's still there, only you now probably know it by another name, Ridley House. And suddenly, that name makes a whole lot more sense, doesn't it? So what about the Ridley House today? Today, the Richard Kemp property lives on as Ridley House, and yes, now you know exactly where the name comes from, the Ridley Turtle. It's part of the Key West Historic Inns, and it's still operating on Caroline Street. So people are sleeping, swimming, and having breakfast, and yes, sitting on those porches today in a place connected to a family that arrived more than 180 years ago. I love that. You don't have to visit Key West like you're taking a history class. So please, that's not what I ever want these stories to feel like. Instead, here's what I ask. I ask that you walk slower, look at the houses, read those historic markers, wonder who lived there, and every once in a while ask, did I know that? And what else can I learn? Because chances are there's a really good story hiding behind those fences. So before you go, here's my question for you. Next time you're in Key West, are you going to walk past Ridley House the same way? Or are you going to look at it and immediately think, Turtle House? Because I'm pretty sure that's what I'm going to call it forever now. And if you've stayed at Ridley House, I definitely want to hear about it. Better yet, has anyone experienced anything there that made you wonder whether Mr. Mosby is still keeping an eye on the place? Send me your story. And if you love this side of Key West, make sure you're following Fun in Key West podcast, hit subscribe, tell all your friends about it. And more than anything, head over to FunInKeyWest.com because over there, you're going to find a lot more information about those houses, people, strange little details and stories hiding around Key West. And before we close out today, another big thank you to Key West Food Tours for sponsoring today's episode. If you want to explore Key West through its food, history, and stories, check them out over at FunInKeyWest.com/food tour. Until next time, I'll see you in Key West.